Chapter 1. The Precipice of War. The halls of the Imperial High Court of Zelther were carved from obsidian and veined with pulsing streams of bioluminescent energy, their design a reflection of the Zelthari race itself, cold, powerful, and unyielding. The chamber was massive, its high ceilings designed to accommodate the towering forms of the noble Zelthari elite, who stood twice the height of most humanoid species. The throne at the far end of the room, crafted from the bones of a long-extinct predator, was the seat of the Empress of Zelther, but today, that seat remained empty. Instead, at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the hushed murmurs of warlords, generals, and diplomats, stood Princess Saria Zelther, heir to the Empire, her presence commanding the attention of all. She wore the ceremonial armor of her house, a sleek, metallic exosuit that reflected her status as both a leader and a warrior. Her violet skin shimmered under the glow of the chamber's lights, and her piercing silver eyes surveyed the gathered officials with an intensity that left no room for doubt. This meeting would decide the future of the Empire. For months, tensions had been escalating between the Zelthari Empire and the Galactic Federation, a fragile peace strained by border disputes, economic sabotage, and the long-standing mistrust that had always existed between the two factions. The Federation, a coalition of planets governed by mutual cooperation, had been pressing the Zelthari to withdraw their warships from disputed territories, but the Empire had never been one to yield to foreign pressure. The Empress herself had declared that the Zelthari would never be dictated to by lesser species, and many within the court echoed her sentiment. And yet, despite the voices calling for war, there was one final attempt at diplomacy. A human had been sent, a single Federation diplomat, arriving alone, unarmed, to stand before the most powerful warlords of the Zelthari Empire and attempt to turn back the tide of war before it began. Saria had been skeptical of this meeting from the start. The Zelthari did not respect weakness, and the Federation had always seemed soft in their endless pursuit of peace. A diplomat? A single unarmed human? He would be nothing more than a sacrificial offering to the Empire's growing fury. And yet, when the doors to the chamber opened and the human entered, something unexpected happened. The murmurs stopped. The air, thick with unspoken threats, seemed to tighten as every noble, every warrior, every official turned their gaze to the lone figure who now walked across the chamber's polished floor with measured, unhurried steps. A human male, dressed in the simple yet refined attire of a Federation envoy, walked into the heart of an empire that had crushed civilizations far greater than his own. Saria narrowed her eyes, studying him as he approached the central platform. He was unarmed, vulnerable, yet his stride did not waver, his posture did not falter. There was no fear in his expression, no hesitation in his movements. Either he was the bravest human she had ever seen, or he was a fool. The assembled warlords and nobles watched in silence as the human finally stopped before the council table, standing directly across from Saria. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching, before he inclined his head slightly in greeting. Then he spoke. "I am Elias Carter, diplomatic representative of the Galactic Federation. I come in peace, but I do not come in submission." The words rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. A low murmur spread among the gathered Zelthari, their predatory eyes flashing with interest, some with amusement, others with quiet approval. It was a bold statement, and boldness was something the Zelthari could understand. Saria arched an eyebrow. "You are either very brave or very foolish human." Elias's lips curved slightly, perhaps a little of both. Saria watched him carefully, searching for any sign of deception, any indication that he was hiding fear beneath a mask of confidence, but she found none. Interesting. The room remained silent for several moments, the weight of expectation settling over them like a storm about to break. Then one of the warlords, a massive Zelthari male with scarred features and the battle markings of a veteran, leaned forward, his deep voice rumbling through the chamber. "You stand before the might of the Zelthari Empire, human. You come alone, without guards, without weapons. Do you not fear us?" Elias turned his gaze toward the warlord, meeting the challenge in his tone with a calm that was almost unsettling. "Fear is not the absence of danger," he said simply. "It is the choice to act despite it." A beat of silence, then a laugh. A deep, rumbling laugh from the warlord himself. "You have courage, human. I will give you that." Saria's eyes narrowed slightly. This was not the reaction she had expected. The Zelthari admired strength, but strength was not always about muscle and might. There was strength in conviction, in the willingness to face an overwhelming force without bending. And Elias Carter had just demonstrated that strength without lifting a single weapon. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. Tell me, Elias Carter, why should we not simply take what we want? The Federation is weak. Your people do not seek war. Why should we listen to a single diplomat when we could claim victory through force? Elias did not hesitate. Because war with the Federation would not bring you victory. It would bring you destruction. The chamber fell silent again. But this time, the air was different. Tense. Expectant. Dangerous. A threat. Spoken plainly. Saria could feel the shift in the room. Some of the warlords bristled at the audacity of his words. Others looked at him with new consideration. He was playing a dangerous game. But for the first time, Saria wondered, could he actually win it? She watched him, studied the way he held himself, the way he did not back down, the way his pulse remained steady even as he stood surrounded by beings who could tear him apart without effort. And in that moment, she felt something she had never expected to feel toward a human diplomat. Respect. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human was not a fool after all. Chapter 2. The line between courage and recklessness. The weight of Elias Carter's words settled over the chamber like an unspoken challenge, thick with the promise of consequences. Around the grand hall, the assembled warlords and noble strategists of the Zelthari Empire sat in a charged silence, their expressions ranging from mild amusement to open hostility. No one had ever spoken to them like this before, not without a fleet of warships at their back, not without the promise of retribution should they be ignored. Princess Saria Zelthar watched intently, her silver eyes never leaving Elias's face, searching for any sign of hesitation, any crack in his confidence, but he stood unwavering, his posture straight, his gaze calm. She found herself both irritated and intrigued by it. The Zelthari Empire did not negotiate with weakness. Their history was one of conquest, of power, of proving through battle who deserved to rule and who deserved to kneel. Yet here was a single unarmored human, speaking in a room filled with the galaxy's most feared warriors, refusing to kneel, refusing to bend, even as they sized him up like prey. That alone demanded acknowledgement. Saria could feel it in the way the warlords reacted, their initial amusement turning into something sharper, something more curious. He had earned their attention, but attention was not the same as respect, and respect was not freely given. The silence stretched, and then, predictably, it was General Vortek who broke it. The warlord's deep, rumbling voice carried across the chamber like a rolling storm, his massive form shifting as he leaned forward, his crimson gaze fixed on Elias like a predator watching its next meal. You speak of destruction, human, but you do not carry the weight to deliver such threats. His voice was low, deliberate, each word sharpened by the unmistakable edge of a challenge. The Federation's fleets are numerous, yes, but they lack the will for war. You would rather negotiate than fight, and that is why you will lose. A few of the other warlords nodded in agreement, their battle-scarred faces filled with something between amusement and condescension. Elias did not flinch. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his hands still clasped neatly behind his back, his expression unchanged. He did not let himself get drawn into their games, did not react like prey caught in a hunter's stare. And in doing so, he turned the conversation on its head. You misunderstand, Elias said, his voice steady. I am not here to threaten you. I am here to warn you. The warlords exchanged glances, some smirking, others narrowing their eyes. Saria tilted her head slightly. A warning and a threat are the same thing, are they not? Elias's gaze flicked toward her, the smallest hint of a knowing smile at the edges of his lips. Not necessarily. A threat is an attempt at control. A warning is a courtesy. Saria did not look away. Then I suppose we should feel honored by your courtesy. You should feel concerned by it, Elias countered smoothly. Because the Federation may not start wars, but we know how to end them. The room shifted. A subtle, nearly imperceptible change in the air. The warlords no longer looked at him as a foolish diplomat who had wandered into the wrong room. Now they looked at him as a man who might know something they did not. Saria had not expected him to be this dangerous with words alone. A dance of words and steel. Diplomacy, as humans practiced it, was a kind of warfare, Saria realized. It was not fought with weapons or fleet formations, but with subtlety, with manipulation, with an understanding of power that did not require brute force. The Zelthari had always viewed diplomacy as a delaying tactic, a weakness, but Elias Carter was not delaying anything. He was guiding, pushing the conversation exactly where he wanted it to go. And she wasn't sure she liked that. Saria was about to speak again when one of the warlords, a younger, more impulsive general named Varzak, let out a growl of impatience and stood abruptly, the metal plates of his armor clicking as he moved. "Enough of this posturing," he snarled. "You come into our court, human, and you claim that war will destroy us? You claim that your federation, with all its weakness, is something we should fear." He bared his fangs in a gesture of challenge. "I see nothing but arrogance from a man who hides behind words." Elias's expression remained calm, unreadable. "And what is it you suggest, General?" Varzak's gaze darkened. "I say words are useless. I say you prove your strength, or you leave this chamber in disgrace." The chamber stirred, whispers rising among the gathered nobles. It was a direct challenge, a test of whether this human was worth listening to or whether he would be discarded as an insignificant insect. Saria leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but firm. "This is the court of the Empire, Varzak. You do not challenge envoys like warriors in an arena." Varzak did not take his eyes off Elias. "Then let him walk away. If he refuses, then we will know that all he has to offer are words." Elias, to his credit, did not even blink. "I accept." A ripple of shock and amusement swept through the chamber. Saria felt herself tense before she could stop it. This human was either a fool or the most calculating man she had ever met. Varzak grinned, his sharp teeth flashing under the dim glow of the bioluminescent walls. "Brave words." He cracked his knuckles. "Let us see if you can back them up." The trial of the blade. The court's training arena was vast and ancient, its stone floors worn from centuries of combat, its walls etched with the names of warriors who had bled and died in this very space. It was a sacred place for the Zelthari, a place where strength was tested, where honor was proven. Elias stood at the center, his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up, his stance relaxed but coiled like a spring beneath the surface. Varzak loomed before him, easily twice his size, his heavy armor glinting in the dim light. In his hand, he held a Zelthari dueling blade, a weapon designed not for clean, efficient kills, but for brutal, decisive combat. Saria stood on the elevated platform, arms crossed, watching with a growing sense of unease. Varzak would not hold back. The human would die here. And yet, Elias had not even hesitated to accept. The duel began. Varzak lunged, his blade flashing in an arc meant to end the fight in a single swing. Elias sidestepped effortlessly, his movements faster than they should have been for a human, his body moving with precision, with calculated intent. The blade missed him by inches. Varzak snarled, adjusting his stance. Elias still had no weapon. The fight should have ended in seconds. It did not, because Elias did not fight like a warrior. He fought like a tactician. Saria's eyes narrowed as she watched him move, every step calculated, every motion designed to waste the least amount of energy possible while forcing his opponent into mistakes. He let Varzak overextend himself, let him swing too hard, let his frustration become his weakness. And then, in the span of a single heartbeat, Elias struck. With a speed that should not have been possible, he sidestepped another swing, moved inside Varzak's guard, and drove a single, precise strike to the warlord's throat, not with a weapon, but with his own hand, his fingers pressing against a vital nerve point. Varzak collapsed. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Elias Carter straightened, adjusting his cuffs, and Saria, for the first time in her life, felt something dangerously close to admiration for a human. Chapter 3. The Cost of Strength. The chamber was silent, the kind of silence that settled deep, pressing against the walls like an unspoken command, holding every Zelthari warlord and noble in rapt attention. In the center of the dueling arena, Elias Carter stood unshaken, his breath even, his stance composed, as the defeated General Varzak lay gasping on the ground, clutching his throat where Elias had struck him. Saria Zelther had seen thousands of warriors fight, had watched seasoned champions battle in the blood pits of the Empire, had fought in countless skirmishes herself, and yet, she had never witnessed anything like this. A human, unarmed, defeating a seasoned Zelthari warlord with nothing but speed and precision. It was not luck, nor was it a mere show of bravery. It was something far more dangerous. He knew exactly what he was doing. Saria's grip on the railing of the observation deck tightened, her mind racing through the implications. How had the Federation produced warriors like this? How had they hidden them for so long? The Federation was supposed to be a coalition of diplomats, traders, and explorers, a faction that sought peace and cooperation, not war. And yet, standing before her, Elias Carter was proving that the Federation was not as weak as the Zelthari had believed. He was dangerous. She had miscalculated, and she hated that she found herself intrigued by it. The warlords, still frozen in stunned silence, slowly began murmuring among themselves, the weight of what they had just witnessed unsettling even the most battle-hardened among them. The Zelthari respected strength, but this was something else entirely. The aftermath of a duel. Varzek, still wheezing, forced himself to his feet. His pride, even more than his body, had taken the brunt of the blow. His crimson eyes burned with fury, but there was also something else lurking behind them. Respect. That was a warrior's move, he admitted grudgingly, his voice rough, but steady. I expected cowardice. I received something else. Elias nodded once, his expression unreadable. I do not fight for sport, General, nor do I fight without reason. Varzek exhaled slowly, then did something Saria did not expect. He inclined his head. A Zelthari warlord, bowing his head, even slightly, to a human diplomat? This was unprecedented. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder, a mix of approval, shock, and curiosity, as Elias turned back toward the central podium, where Saria still stood, her expression carefully neutral. He did not smirk, did not gloat. He simply met her gaze, waiting for her verdict. Saria could feel the weight of every warlord's gaze on her, waiting to see how she would react. To dismiss Elias's victory as meaningless would be to undermine the very foundation of Zelthari culture, the belief that strength, in whatever form it took, must be acknowledged. But to grant him that acknowledgement would mean admitting that the Federation, at least this human, was more than they had assumed. A delicate balance. A dangerous one. Saria's silver eyes met his brown ones, searching, measuring. You have proven that you are not weak, Elias Carter. Her voice was steady, carrying across the hall with practiced precision. But strength alone does not make one worthy of respect. It is how one wields it that matters. Elias inclined his head slightly, his gaze never wavering. Agreed. Saria exhaled slowly. This was no longer a mere negotiation. This was something else. Something far more important. A shift in power. After the duel, Elias was granted temporary guest status within the imperial court, an honor rarely given to outsiders. It was a political maneuver, of course an opportunity for the Zelthari nobles to observe him further, to measure him in ways that went beyond a mere fight. Saria, for her part, kept a watchful eye on him. She met with him more frequently than protocol required, testing him with questions, pressing for weaknesses, for inconsistencies, for anything that might reveal his true motives. Yet, time and time again, Elias proved unshakable. He was not arrogant, nor was he reckless. He was calculating, adaptable, impossibly calm, as though he had already run every scenario through his mind before she had even spoken the words. He did not posture like a warrior, but he carried the presence of one. And the most frustrating part? He did not seem to fear her. Most envoys, even the seasoned ones, held an edge of hesitation when addressing her. Even the Federation's most skilled negotiators had avoided direct confrontation, careful not to tread too boldly in her presence. But Elias Carter? He spoke to her like an equal. And that, more than anything, was what made him dangerous. The night of the betrayal, Saria had not expected the assassination attempt. Not here, not now. She had been walking the corridors of the Imperial Palace, deep in thought, when the shadows moved. Her instincts kicked in a fraction of a second too late. A blade, serrated and meant for precision kills, came too close to her throat, and though she reacted fast enough to dodge the fatal strike, she could already tell there were too many of them. 5 assassins. All Zelthari. Traitors. Saria rolled, drawing her own blade, but she was outnumbered, cornered even as she fought. She knew it would not be enough. Then, gunfire. A sharp, mechanical sound that did not belong in the Imperial halls. One of the assassins dropped instantly, a clean shot to the head. The others snapped their attention toward the source, and that was when Saria saw him. Elias. Standing in the entryway, a sleek Federation sidearm in his hands, his expression cold, unreadable. He should not have been here. And yet, somehow he had known. The assassins hesitated for a fraction of a second. A fatal mistake. Saria moved, cutting down one, while Elias fired again, striking another between the eyes. The remaining 2 tried to flee, but it was too late. Elias's precision was unforgiving, and within seconds, the corridor was silent again. Saria lowered her blade, breathing hard, her gaze snapping to him. How did you know? Elias holstered his weapon calmly, as if this had been nothing more than an inconvenience. You think I came here without preparing for something like this? His voice was steady, with just the faintest hint of amusement. I've dealt with warlords before, Princess. I know how the game is played. Saria was silent, staring at him, realizing this human had just saved her life. Elias met her gaze evenly. Still think I'm just a diplomat? Saria exhaled slowly, her heart still pounding from the fight. For the first time, she was forced to admit the truth, both to him and to herself. No, she said finally. You are something else entirely. And in that moment, for the first time in her life, Princess Saria Zelthar was in awe of a human. Chapter 4. The future they never expected. The corridors of the Imperial Palace of Zelthar still smelled of blood. The air was thick with the scent of plasma burns, the faint metallic tang of Zelthari blood pooling on the pristine marble floors. The bodies of the assassins had been cleared, but their presence still lingered in the silence that followed. Saria Zelthar stood in the dim glow of the corridor's bioluminescent lighting, her violet skin marked with smears of battle, her silver eyes still sharp with the remnants of combat adrenaline. The weight of what had just happened was pressing against her mind, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. A Zelthari princess should not have needed saving. And yet, she had been a heartbeat away from death, outnumbered, unable to overcome the treachery that had been waiting in the shadows. Had Elias Carter not been there, had this human not defied all logic, all expectations, and intervened when he should have been halfway across the palace, she would not be standing here now. She had never been in a position like this before. The weight of a life debt sat uneasily in her chest. Across from her, Elias holstered his weapon, his face unreadable, the shadows of the corridor casting a harsh edge to his sharp features. He had not spoken since the last assassin fell. He had not gloated, had not demanded recognition, had not acted like the savior of a royal bloodline. He simply watched her, waiting for her to process what had just happened, waiting for her to decide what she was going to do about it. The silence between them was thick, the weight of unspoken words pressing against the space that separated them. And then Saria finally spoke. You should not have been there. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but the accusation within it was unmistakable. Elias did not flinch. I should not have had to be. A sharp retort rose to her tongue, but she swallowed it down. Because he was right. If her own people had not betrayed her, if she had been prepared, if she had seen the signs of treachery among her own court, if she had not underestimated the depths of ambition within her empire, then a human diplomat would never have needed to save her life. She hated it, not because it was humiliating, but because it changed everything. The empire in chaos. The attack had sent shockwaves through the imperial court, unraveling tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface for far longer than Saria had realized. The assassins had been nobles from within her own ranks, loyal to the war factions who wanted war with the Federation, who saw her insistence on diplomacy as weakness, as betrayal. The news spread through the Zelthari Empire like wildfire, dividing the warlords into 2 factions, those who still supported Saria's leadership and those who saw the failed assassination as an opportunity to remove her entirely. War was no longer a possibility. It was imminent. And the Federation? The Federation had sent one human diplomat. One man. And somehow, he had not only survived the High Court, not only won the respect of warriors who had crushed civilizations beneath their boots, but had also saved the heir to the Empire in a way that no one, not even Saria herself, could deny. Elias Carter was now a variable that no one had accounted for, and the Empire was on the verge of falling apart. A dangerous alliance. In the days following the attack, Saria and Elias found themselves in the eye of a storm they could no longer control. The warlords who still supported Saria's rule demanded that the traitors be executed immediately, that an example be made, that any sign of rebellion be crushed before it could spread further. But Saria knew that an execution would not be enough. Her rule was now contested, her authority weakened, and the Federation Elias Carter was the only thing standing between the Zelthari and a war that could destroy both sides. She met with him in the war chamber, where maps of the galaxy were projected across the grand table, illuminated in stark holographic light. The outlines of Federation space, Zelthari-controlled territories, and disputed zones flickered between them, a reminder of the fragile balance they were all trying to maintain. Elias stood with his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful as he studied the projections. He had been watching everything unfold, had seen how the Empire had begun to fracture from the inside. He had not yet spoken his opinion, but Saria knew he had one. She watched him from across the table, taking in the way he studied the map, the way he absorbed information without a word. He was a diplomat by title, but he carried himself with the presence of a strategist, of someone who had been on the other side of war before. And she found herself asking the question she had never imagined she would. If you were me, what would you do? Elias looked up, his gaze locking onto hers. Saria did not break eye contact. She was not asking for diplomacy. She was asking for war strategy. His lips curved slightly, something dark and knowing in his expression. You don't want to know the answer to that, princess? She tilted her head. Humor me. Elias exhaled slowly, then stepped forward, his fingers tapping against the edge of the holographic table. You need to cut out the infection before it spreads. The rebellion won't stop with the traitors you killed. There are more waiting, watching, hoping you'll hesitate. His voice was low, matter of fact. If you wait too long, they will strike again. And next time, they will not fail. Saria was silent, absorbing his words. I cannot act without proof, she admitted. Not unless I want to prove my enemies right. They already call me weak. If I execute my own warlords without evidence, I will have started the war myself. Elias nodded. Then find the proof. Or make them reveal themselves. Saria arched an eyebrow. And how do you propose I do that? Elias's smirk returned. Simple. You put me in danger. She stilled. He leaned forward slightly. Right now, I am the most disruptive force in your empire. You and I both know that. The ones who want war will not tolerate me staying here. They will act. And when they do... Saria exhaled slowly, understanding his meaning. We will know exactly who they are. It was a bold plan, a dangerous one, but it was also the only one that would work. And in that moment, as Saria studied the human diplomat standing before her, the man who had defied her expectations at every turn, the man who had saved her life, the man who now stood beside her against the very forces that sought to see them both dead, she realized something she had not allowed herself to before. She trusted him. A human, a diplomat, a warrior, a man who should never have mattered in the grand history of the Zelthari Empire, yet now stood at the center of it, a force that had changed its course forever. Saria Zelthar had always believed in strength above all else, and for the first time in her life, she had found someone who possessed a strength unlike any she had ever known, a strength that terrified her, and a strength she knew she could not let go.